got your own style, that's just slang for you, ain't got it.
Welcome to another episode of Art Time. I'm Jason.
And I'm Filbert, color matching technician here at Automotive Art. On today's episode, we'll be going through some of the technical aspects of
The vehicle refinishing system. Alright, so many persons may not know, but paint is how automotive art actually first got started. Now this came from, the idea that high quality and world-class color matching should not cost a fortune.
Did you know we have been in the auto refinishing industry since 1990?
From 1990 to now, quick maps, 31? Haha, gold star. Alright, so here's the thing. Over the years, we have aimed to be cutting edge and dynamic. And that has resulted in automotive art not only manufacturing their own paint, but distributing it globally to over 65 countries.
To demonstrate our amazing products that we sell, a door panel was sanded ahead of time and is now ready to demonstrate our finishing system.
And here we have our door, and trust me, it looks like it's almost ready to be put on a vehicle. It's almost there, but this is not how it looked when we first dug it out. We wanted to make sure we got something that needed a bit of work so you can see what our products can do. So what's the first thing we had to do, Filbert?
Well, before we started anything, we had to make sure the surface was free of all contaminants such as waxes, grease, oil, road tar.
Road tar.
So we have our wax
tar on the road. Go ahead.
So we have our wax and grease remover right here.
Now, an important thing to know is that a major part of your final finish is heavily dependent on the preparation. And that's why cleaning the surface of all these contaminants that Filbert just mentioned is so important. Now, after he finished doing the cleaning, we noticed that there were two small holes that were in here. You remember where they were, Filbert?
There was one right here and there was one right there. I don't know if you can notice.
You can't even see it now, and that's the proof of how good of a job was done. So how did we get to apply that product?
This bad boy right here. Alright, so with this is a multi-soft fine finishing film. This is best for small dents, not really big jobs, but it does the work.
So because this one only had small dents is how we ended up using the multi-soft. Now were we able to just apply it just as is, or did we have to do anything first?
Well, we had to sand it first. We had to get the surface rough enough with some 80 grit sandpaper, and then we applied the film.
Alright, so you'll hear us talking about a few different types of sandpaper with different numbers, and I don't want you to get confused. It basically means that the lower the number, the rougher or the more coarse the sandpaper is. So the higher the number goes, the smoother it gets. So sometimes you hear someone say a 400, a 220, a 1000. That just lets you know what level of smooth the sandpaper is. He had to sand the area first with the 80 grit sandpaper, and after he did that is why he was able to apply the multi-soft. And then what you did after that?
After applying the filler and it dries, I sanded the filler with a 120 grit sandpaper just to get it feathered into the edges so everything looked uniform. And then after doing that, I wax and grease remove the surface again. Alright? Got it free of all the contaminants. And then I went into priming.
Alright, the fun part, priming. So, the important thing to know is that in order for the primer to hold, we had to do something with the rest of the door.
Yeah, that's why I have a handful of sandpapers right here. So, what I did on the rest of the surface, I sanded it with a 400 grit sandpaper. That's just to allow the primer to adhere to the surface or stick to the surface. Yeah, so I had to rough it up with a 400.
So we roughed up the area, we put on the primer. Now what's the purpose of the primer?
Primer is to allow the paint to adhere or stick to the surface.
So it needs to be sticky, sticky icky. Alright, so we've got our primer, we've done our filling, we've done our sanding. How long would it take for the primer to dry?
With the primer, it depends on the hardener because we have different choices of hardener here at Automotive Art. So the faster the hardener, the faster the drying time.
And we know not everyone always has a booth, not everyone has, a closed area where they can do their spraying. So that's where the difference and the varying in hardness would come in. It also has to do with the temperature. Is it a very hot, bright, sunny day, or is it overcast? Has it been raining? And these type of things would determine whether or not you would use a normal hardener, a slow hardener, or a fast hardener. All right? Sounds good?
Yeah, man, you
So what we got to do next? Is it the fun part yet?
Almost there. So after everything has been dried, the primer has been dried and fully cured, we sand that primer down with a 800 grit sand.
We gotta do sanding again? Yeah. Why? Why is that?
Because the primer has like a rough texture when it's finished, so we gotta get it smooth enough with the 800 sandpaper.
And this is gonna help to make the paint stick.
Yeah, make the paint stick.
Ah, gotcha.
We're gonna also make the paint stick, and the reason why we choose the 800 sandpaper because it's not too rough and it's not too coarse.
So it's just right. Kind of like Mama and Papa Bear's porridge. I got you, Goldilocks. I got you. So Philbert, is it finally time to start painting this yet?
Yes, it's now the fun time. It's time to get painted.
Lovely.
All right, so at Automotive Art, we have two choices of paint lines. Either you use the motor base, which is our base coat 80 line. That one has no clear mix within it. Or we can use our motor clear, which is our single stage. That one has clear already mixed within it.
And today, we're gonna be using the base. All right, so Philbert and his team of crazy mad scientists in the paint room, as you can see already, look like a mad scientist already, have concocted this crazy, nice, different type of color for us to try on this panel right here. Now, before we forget, we wanted to touch on the mixing ratios for the Express primer. Now, the primer was mixed 4:1. That means you have 4 parts of primer and 1 part of hardener with about 10% reducer. Now, when you hear 4:1, just think of a dollar. A dollar has 4 quarts in it, or 4.25 cents. So this, in this instance, is gonna be a dollar, and this just means that 25 cents out of this is what your mixing ratio is gonna be. All right, so I'm gonna get out of the crazy man's way so he can come and show you guys what he's gonna work with. So Philbert is going to now be mixing our motor-based paint, and this is mixed 1:1 with reducer. So he's going to show an equal amount. 1:1, this basically means whatever amount of paint he puts, he'll be putting the same amount of reducer in it. All right, guys, so you'll see that Philbert is using his mixing cup. Now, on the mixing cup has different sections that would help with the mixing ratios. So similarly, like I mentioned with the primer has a 4:1, what he's using there is a 1:1 for the paint, and when we get to our clears, it's going to be a 2:1. All right, so when using the mixing cup, you're gonna see the numbers laid out, and that's what he's following. So he fills it up all the way up to the number that's on the left, and whatever he did on the left is what he's going to do on the right. And that's what you're gonna see him do with the reducer as well. All right, guys, so you just saw Philbert spraying the door. Now, a few things that I wanted to mention. Now, you'd notice the way in which he was spraying the door. He was going from one end all the way across to the other and then back across again, ensuring not to just go from edge to edge. When you go edge to edge, it causes lines, and you don't want any lines. If you're spraying the entire side of a vehicle, the last thing you want to see is that there is a section of one part looking sprayed and the other part isn't. So that's why he was doing that continuation. You would see he started from the top and made his way down to the bottom. He would use half of what he would have carried over from one side. When he's coming back across the other way, he's going half of that. That way he has a continuous coverage going all the way down. So one thing you want to know is that he used the 1.3 nozzle gun. When we were doing the primers, he actually used a 1.7 nozzle gun. Now, as far as his air pressure goes, it was varying between 25 to 30 PSI. All right, so there's a few things that would determine when you use 25, when you use 30. It all depends on the size of the compressor that you're using. So all these different things kind of come into play with it, but we won't dive too deep into it. But as far as what we were doing here today, that is what we were using. So now that we've gotten the painting out of the way, it is time to move on to the clear. The clear is what is going to give you that shine, that gloss, and that protection. All right, and we have a few different types that you can choose from. So it's not only one, so we like to give persons options. Now, if you want the best quality clear that Automotive Art has to provide, that's where the 9260 comes into place. All right, this is especially important for us here in a climate where it's really, really hot. This was going to give the protection on the paint to make sure your color lasts you very, very long. All right, so if you want the best, use the 9260. It has a high build, you'll get more protection, and it has the most insane shine that you will see on the body of your vehicle. The next option you can go to is the 9250. All right, so as you can see, the numbers are going down. That means that the solid content in them are getting a little bit lower, but it's still really, really good. So this would be your number 2 option, your 9250 clear. All right, and then we're gonna go down to the 40. Now I'm gonna tell you something about the 40 and the 50. Because of the solid content, your 50, you're gonna need to mix this 2 to 1. This is gonna be with hardener, all right, and you're gonna need a little bit of reducer in there as well. So that's where the 50 comes in. Because of the solid content in it, you need a little bit of reducer so it comes to the gun, so it flows. Now, because we're dropping down to a 40, you actually don't need any reducer. You'd only be using hardener. So you're saving yourself the cost of having to buy an additional product. So it all depends on, what your pocket can handle and the finish that you want to get out of it. Now, you're going to realize that we have the 8241 here, and this is what we're actually going to be using today. The reason we're using this is because the curing time in this is a lot faster, and we're trying to see how best we can pack everything in together in this one video. So the 8241 allows us to do that. So that's why we're going to be using this on today's episode. All right, so now our door has been painted. We did the first coat, we allowed it to flash off for 10 to 15 minutes, added our second coat, and now it's time to clear. All right, so Philbert is gonna come over and he's gonna mix his clear and he's gonna apply the clear. Remember, the clear is what's gonna give you that shine and that protection. So for this one, we're using the 8241. This one is mixed 2 to 1, so it's $1.50. So you're gonna be using whatever amount of the clear you use, you're gonna use half of that amount in your hardener. And the hardener is what is gonna allow the paint to dry and seal it in. And he's gonna have his mixing cup to make sure he gets his measurements 100% accurate. All right, so Philbert is gonna start spraying the clear onto the door. All right, he's setting his gun and making sure everything is set, setting it to around 25 to 30 PSI, starting from the top and starting on the outside of the panel and making his way straight across so he doesn't have any edges in between. And he'll keep doing that as he makes his way down to the bottom, making sure that he covers at least half of what he sprayed already before he moves on to the next layer to make sure there's continuous coverage all the way down. And you can already see the shine starting to happen at the top. All right, so we let that flash off after he's finished, give it 10-15 minutes and then do another coat, and then that is the end of your clearing process and you're pretty much done. And there you have it, guys. We've come to the end of our demo. We've tried our best to compact as much as we could into this episode. There is so much more that we could have touched on. However, if you have any comments, concerns, questions, please be sure to put them in the comments and we will get back to you guys as soon as possible. So thanks for spending time with us here on another episode of Art Time, and we're out of here.
Peace.